Hi folks, this is your MWIS Winter Planner in association with Petzl. Interesting patterns developing in terms of sustained wintry conditions in the later stages of January and onwards into February as well on many projections. This is our week ahead situation on the pressure patterns. This is the 7-day average up until the 26th of January, and what is developing is a blocking area of high pressure centered around Scandinavia, and that's a useful puzzle piece to see in terms of drawing us into a colder weather regime. For the moment, we've got areas of low pressure circulating off the Atlantic, generally taking a track just toward the southwest of the British Isles. That will feed more of a southeasterly wind flow pattern through these days ahead this week, which initially is not particularly cold. The source of the air is either coming off the Atlantic or it's recirculating back off the Mediterranean. But the chances of a colder easterly are increasing once we get toward the weekend. And colder air that's being drawn off the Arctic Circle around into northern eastern parts of Scandinavia and the western parts of Russia later this week may well hold the key to the patterns that follow as that easterly air tries to be drawn further in our direction. The ongoing pattern through to the end of January and the start of February, this is the 7 days to the 2nd, still shows high pressure to the north, and it's expanded a bit further from Scandinavia towards Greenland, and that again is quite a block to the weather patterns. Allows an easterly weather regime to generally prevail. We're still seeing areas of low pressure likely to run through the system just to the south of the British Isles toward the Mediterranean, so any milder Atlantic air is generally deflected away towards Spain and Portugal at this time. Once more though, we still have that question in terms of, do we find a much colder Scandinavian type of northeasterly, or are we still circulating back a less cold southeasterly type of pattern, or even some of the air that recirculates off the Atlantic? That's the big question mark. Many indications at least see us into that colder version of an easterly for a while at least. Naturally, once we go further ahead, there is lower confidence in exactly how the pattern plays out, but signals still maintain high pressure toward the north and lower pressure toward the south, which would allow chillier, easterly type of air masses to still dominate across our part of the world. And that is even projected to take us onwards into mid-February, with high pressure still further to the north. It does give us the scope then for ongoing substantially wintry conditions across the mountains, with little in the way of substantial thawing, and we'll likely see some fresh snowfalls as well. Let's look through those shorter term details then. This is your freezing level heading onwards into Tuesday, and at this time we're under a less cold variant of the air mass, with the freezing level across the mountains up to higher elevations, 1,000 metres or above for many places. There will be some pockets of frost lower down in the northwest of the Highlands in the morning, but your daytime freezing level is up on higher slopes, and you may just be at around freezing point on the high tops in Scotland or just above across England and Wales. That will be a similar situation taking us onwards into Wednesday, again around 1,000 metres, maybe coming up a bit higher over Wales as a milder southerly component gets into the mix here. That drives northwards with some milder air on Wednesday evening trying to push into the Highlands. It may just go above freezing even to the higher tops through Wednesday night and into early Thursday. That looks quite short-lived though, because some much colder air is waiting in the wings out just to the east of us, and that has a much lower freezing level that looks like making inroads westwards across Scotland through Thursday daytime, dropping to 600 metres or lower, especially across eastern areas, perhaps a bit more widely over the Highlands, maybe even into northern England later on in the day. A bit of uncertainty on exactly where that boundary falls, but it does look like a colder air mass envelops much of the Highlands by this time, and taking us into Friday, much of the Highlands again staying below around 600 metres, perhaps lower across the northeast, a bit higher out toward the coast towards the west and southwest, where it may just be even above freezing slightly to the highest of tops. Over England and Wales, we're back at around 800 metres by the time we go through into Friday, and indications into the weekend maybe just drops that level a little bit more with time. Saturday sees a similar story. Sunday maybe just a bit lower overall over England and Wales. That's less certain at this time, just depends how much of that easterly air gets all the way across the country. Later this week then, there is the potential for some more substantial snowfalls across the eastern parts of the Scottish Highlands. At the moment, you've got a decent covering with hardened consolidated snow varying in extent and depth across the Highlands, but quite extensive really across most of the higher terrain. Keep an eye on the local avalanche reports for ground conditions in the days ahead. This is where we go through Tuesday, Wednesday. Let's just skip the story on. Not a great deal really changes in this time, maybe just some thawing even through Wednesday evening and night as we saw some milder air come in. But then through Thursday and onwards into Friday, totals start to mount up across the east and southeastern highlands as the persistent east-southeasterly wind comes in and has enough moisture to deposit a fair amount of precipitation. Rain or sleet at lower ground, but snow across the hills and mountains pretty widely. Some substantial depths then being modelled here onwards as we get to the weekend. Not too much though further out west. Patchier amounts will extend westwards, but the west coast may well see very little, and just the hint of something also on the ground for the North Pennines and around the borders as well. Quick look at the general weather situation. We've got an area of low pressure circulating to the south of Ireland on Tuesday. That's bringing a strengthening south-southeasterly wind, increasing the gale force across the Scottish mountains, already gale or severe gale force across the Welsh mountains from the word go on Tuesday, and that will extend further to northern England as time goes on too. Some heavier rain moving in to South Wales as well. A few patchy bits of flurries or light spots of rain across the eastern highlands in the morning, a few left into the afternoon, but a fair amount of dry weather across much of Scotland and northern England. An area of rain becomes fairly patchy as it runs eastwards, some hill snow on the higher ground across the highlands into early Wednesday. Bits and pieces of that still around with some rain and hill snow into Wednesday daytime. Eastern parts of the highlands could see something more persistent though, and that really sets the scene then later in the week with that east-southeasterly airstream moving into Scotland and areas of fronts just tangle around a general centre of low pressure, adding to the moisture content in the atmosphere. So a lot of low cloud, areas of patchy rain and drizzle across England and Wales, and hill snow, as we've said, across the highlands in the south and east. Staying windy as well throughout the middle part of this week. Those east-southeasterly winds will be persistently gale force with powerful gusts downslope toward the west of many hills and mountains. So some difficult days ahead, and increasingly severe wind chill factor across higher terrain. Low pressure then just continues to spiral around near and just to the south of us later on this week. Indications just weaken that somewhat as we get toward the weekend. It still looks a rather windy picture though, with our isobars close together with that ongoing easterly flow and some further snow flurries, maybe more persistent flurries, into the eastern parts of Scotland over the weekend. All the while, western parts will be drier and the wind flow pattern just maybe easing in strength there as we get towards Sunday. Lower confidence, it must be said, between all the various models by the time we go into next week, but some further Atlantic lows try and do the same sort of trick really and spin around near to us, but always just driving toward the south. And there is much more uncertainty by a week away just on the strength and the positioning of a low like that. But if it gets into the mix, then there is the scope into next week for some snowfalls with areas of weather systems bumping into that cold air. We'll keep you right up to date with those developments. That is your winter planner in association with Petzl. Thanks for watching.